Did he strike you as being a very conventional kind of Englishman or as a very different kind of Englishman?
No, he struck me as being with it at that time.
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Ilani of Barbados. I found this gem of an interview about Prince Edward, who was the King of England and abdicated his throne, and his American divorcee wife. And I thought, is history repeating itself? Let's go. Okay, so we see here how Wallis Simpson, which is actually her name is Wallis, is dominating the conversation with her husband, talking over him a bit.
So the Duke knows that I'm speechless, which I'm sure the television audience will know that I'm speechless in front of anything. So
And it just reminded me of Meghan.
No.
Nobody prepares you.
No, I mean, but even down, but even down to like the national anthem.
Okay, I'm just gonna call them Edward and Wallis. I hope you don't mind. The correct titles is Edward, the Duke of Windsor, Wallis Simpson, the Duchess of Windsor. Edward was also Edward VIII, or just simply the King of England. And so we'll just keep it very simple. Edward and Wallis. Wallis is her actual name. I'll get to that. Anyway, you see here that they're both besotted by their wives, obviously, allowing them to take control of the interviews. And it is really interesting because they both put their wives first in terms of, you know, Edward abdicated the throne, not because of his family being against her, although that was a bit of a thing at the time for people to not accept for the King of England, who was a bachelor when he became king. He was only king for 10 months. But for him to then take on a wife, the government was the one against it, and the Church of England was against it as well. Whereas Harry, as you know, Meghan was completely accepted, and then that was just a choice he made to leave. Edward did not have a choice if he wanted to marry this woman. He had to leave.
That I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love.
He had to abdicate the throne. So now let's talk about once Edward and Wallis left, what were their choices? Well, Edward was given a post as Governor General of the Bahamas. Governor General is something we're familiar with in the Commonwealth. It's the representative of the Queen, and they're given a residence similar to, like, I mean, the White House. Like, you know, they have a certain residence. But that house was being renovated, so they were forced to live in another house, which Wallis Simpson described as a shack by the sea. So this is the house, you can see it here, and it is by the sea, but a shack it is not, okay? And this house is exactly how it was in the 1930s. It is a spread of a house, and they took 4 fireplaces from their homes in England and installed them here. And if you've ever been to the Caribbean, if you've ever been to any of the islands of the Caribbean, you know, we certainly don't need any fireplaces. So it was quite grand, but it's described by Wallis Simpson as a shack. I mean, like, what? How can you say shack? I'm just here looking at the pictures and I'm just like, why would you even call it that? Shack? Okay, in the Caribbean, shack has a completely different meaning, because a shack is a shack. I mean, a real shack. It could be even a coconut husk shack. It could even be a palm tree shack. It could be a shack. Shack. Anyway, luckily it's on the market, so we were able to see these lovely pictures of it. I mean, Edward always said the post was beneath him. In this article here, you see that he says that. I immediately began to feel some similarities between the couples. There's a certain amount of entitlement and arrogance and just not being satisfied with anything at all. If you remember how Meghan spoke about in the interview with Oprah, the cottage, I mean Frogmore Cottage, okay, even if that's the signpost on the gate, That's what it says. We understand this is not a cottage. And so this is what Frogmore Cottage actually looks like. And it is ridiculous to come on the World platform and talk about the cottage. You know, the cottage. I mean, seriously, people will not think cottage because people are living in the projects they're watching. Let's call it what it is. Say my home, our home that cost £3 million to renovate so that we can move in there. I mean, you cannot spend £3 million on a cottage or a shack. You can't. And by the way, that was £3 million of taxpayer money, which allegedly they repaid, of course, once they left. But it's hard to find those kind of receipts because it's a personal thing, you know, between family members to repay that. But let's pretend they did. And let's pretend we believe that. 3 million and you just rolled out. So let's talk about career goals. This is really interesting because there's so many parallels here. And I hope you appreciate that I've had to do a lot of research because this is not of my time. I was not there at this time. And also Wallis Simpson and Edward, they didn't, and I don't know if it's because they didn't give interviews. So I don't know if it's because at the time that would almost have been, well, I know for sure like what Meghan and Harry did by talking about the family members in the way that they did would almost have been like treason back in those days because things were a little bit stricter in those days. But they never gave any interviews. But this is one, and I found it. So their career goals. I think it's pretty clear that Edward and Wallis had something else in mind for themselves. This article goes on to say that after the 4-year stint in the Bahamas, they went on to prefer the celebrity lifestyle that they enjoyed in France until their death. By the way, Edward died within 2 years of this interview, and Wallis Simpson a couple more years after that. So they really waited to the end of their lives. And even Edward says in the interview that most of the people that were against him and his situation are now in the ground. So at least they waited, you know what I mean? And also, they didn't have to wait because you have to remember this is the time when yellow journalism in the 30s and 40s. This is the time when yellow journalism starts to have it's invented really in this time. And yellow journalism being sensationalism, tabloid, you know, and she's American. So in America, it was a thing. So she could have found Oprah in America and done an interview like that. They could have, but they didn't because they had some form of respect and decorum. So anyway, back to their political aspirations. So Edward did have political aspirations. In fact, he says, I had a lot of political conceptions, but had to keep them to myself, as that was the tradition of the royal family.
I had lots of political conceptions, but I kept them to myself. That is the tradition of the royal family.
The royal family would not want anything to do with politics or like merching, as Lady Colin Campbell calls it. You know, anything with media, advertising, whatever. They wouldn't want anything like that. And I'm not sure if maybe because the government was involved in his abdication in terms of not allowing him to marry this. I think it was like two things against her, which was a twice divorced woman and an American woman. I think that was what played into them not accepting her, which of course was not the case with Meghan. And you would think maybe the Queen, she could have been like, you know, aware of not wanting that to happen on her clock, her watch, because she already knew this happened in her family and was completely embracing Meghan for whatever reason. She did not speak out against her or anything like that. And of course she would have been like, well, okay, so Edward is her uncle. The Edward we're talking about who married the American is her uncle. So because he abdicated, her father had to become king, and then she had to, of course, follow and become queen. So it is something that she might have been mindful of. Like, I don't want this to happen again. I don't want history to repeat itself, at least not in my time. I can't have this happen in my lifetime twice. You know what I mean? Okay, sorry, I keep going back and forth, but the career goals now. So, like I said, maybe that's why Edward was so into politics, because politics did play a role in his having to abdicate and marry in order to marry the woman he loved. Also, Wallis said that the job that she would have liked to have had would have been head of an advertising agency.
I'd like to be head of an advertising agency.
You yourself would?
Yes, because you have lots of things to think up, to sell a product and so forth. I'd like that very much.
Like in 1930. Oh my God. So this is what we would call in the modern day vernacular especially in the YouTube one, or YouTube world, is merching. She would have wanted to merch some stuff, you know, get some merchandise out there. Sweatshirts, you know, saying royalty, maybe diamantes, I don't know. Like, she wanted to be head of advertising that. So advertising is completely the other thing that is against the tradition of the royal family. Is anyone else seeing these parallels? Because I feel so excited. This couple, did Meghan know this story? Did she check out this story? Because I know she said she checked out nothing at all. Now everything I need to know is right in front of me in the form of Harry. I'm sure you saw this story. Remember, both Harry and Edward were born to have a purpose in life. And that purpose in life is public service. And they both threw it away. For the women they love. Or at least that's what they're trying to say. I don't want us to get confused. Edward had to throw it away because they didn't accept her as his wife. Harry did not have to throw it away, but because of her political aspirations, which we now know, and we're going to talk about in the future too, her political aspirations, which are being rumored as wanting to become the president of the United States of America, and also just her hunger for celebrity and hunger for becoming a real life accredited actress, which, you know, never happened to her before. This is an opportunity for her to use or merch her title and merch her platform or whatever to become an actress. These are two things that don't go with the tradition of the royal family. Anyway, let's get back to Edward and his jobs. So we have Harry, who's getting jobs and jobs and jobs. He's coming like a Caribbean man, have 2 job, 3 job. I mean, you know, but Edward also had to find ways of making money. And in this article, it says the Duke's allowance was supplemented by government favors and illegal currency trading. So illegal currency trading, that was a speculation that he was, trading currency, you know, and that goes into a very dark underworld, of course, of, at the time, wars going on. Maybe you're getting into arms dealing, illegal stuff. It goes into a whole different underworld. And so that was highly frowned upon. And he, being good friends with Winston Churchill at the time.
Oh, Winston was a great friend of mine.
Winston Churchill sort of rang him up and said, this you really have to not do. Like, please don't do that. Okay? But I guess you got to do what you got to do when you've left your privileged, ready-made job. Having a little bit of difficulty feeling sympathy for this, trying to conjure it up, but not feeling the pity for this behavior at all. So Edward in this interview does talk about establishment, which I found very forward-thinking. He says that it was a new term of the time that they used to describe the powers that be, you know, in the royal family and those entities surrounding the royal family that were decision-making entities. And he does describe it here.
Well, the establishment was a new word to me until about 15 years ago. When I heard it and I asked people to explain it to me, it's not easy to explain. It's rather an obscure word, but it must have always existed. I think it means authority of the law, of the church, of the, well, I suppose the monarch, to a certain extent, and universities, and maybe the top brass of the Navy and the Army.
But we also heard Princess Diana use it in her famous interview with Martin Bashir. And it was getting confusing when Meghan was talking about the firm, the family. What is she talking about? Institution. You know, she interchanged all these words and it was very confusing for everyone because we're like, is she using code? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, but just so you know, the firm, according to this article, includes Prince William, Kate Middleton, Prince Charles, Duchess Camilla of Cornwall, Prince Edward, not this old-time Prince Edward, but the new-time Prince Edward, Countess Sophie of Wessex, Princess Anne, and naturally the Queen herself. So keep that in mind every time Meghan mentions a firm, and it is usually a negative, it is always a negative connotation in this conversation she's having with Oprah. And just keep in mind that she is talking about the Queen. She is actually bashing the Queen. Full stop. Okay, so another similarity is that in the interviews, I found Wallis and Meghan were both very concentrated in bigging up themselves. You notice Meghan talks about, well, that's an I, the next thing. And Wallis, it talks about also her contributions in the Bahamas. She was running the RAF, which is Royal Air Force Canteen. And I find it really hard to imagine her like...
I ran a canteen, 2 canteens there for the RAF.
With a soup ladle like in there, like, you know, hands-on, in a way hands-on. I just find that difficult because it's the same person that kept talking about a shack. I can't believe her name is Wallis. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know. For me, like, just doing this research, I was a bit concerned because I thought Wallis was one of her like ex-husband's names or something, but it's actually her first name. It's not her surname. It's Wallis, Wallis. I'm sorry, I just can't get over that. Sorry. And of course, you have Meghan talking about she's an asset because of her African skin, of course, to the Commonwealth. Okay, in terms of decorations, Edward and Harry both served in the wars of the time, which is very honorable. Edward, though, refused to wear his medals, and Prince Harry was stripped of his, so that's the difference. And also, I just wanted to like reiterate how Prince Edward never said disparaging things about his family. And I thought it was really cute when he talked about Princess Anne, when he told her that she was such a good horsewoman and she should do the fox hunting, which is the sport of kings, because she was so talented as a rider. And he says this.
Saw my great niece, Anne, and she said 2 words, blood spots. So I thought to myself, well, what a pity.
So I think it just gives you another sort of glimpse into Princess Anne, who Lady Colin Campbell says is the one who said that she didn't approve of Meghan, but for nothing related to race. You just see her how she's an outspoken woman and just says her mind. 2 words, blood sport. Also another tidbit, I liked Kenneth Harris, who was this interviewer in 1939. I think he kind of reminded me of Piers Morgan. By the way, I'm going to do a video on him. I know he just did a lengthy interview. A little bit late, but anyway, I still want to see it and I'm going to review it in real time. So. But yeah, Kenneth Harris kind of reminds me of Piers Morgan. I think it's like just the way his way of speaking and almost over speaking the questions. I like that. Well, I don't know if I like it. It just reminds me of Piers Morgan, which I find kind of entertaining. So whatever.
What we used to call the slums. They were really bad in those days.
I remember. At what point?
So just to recap this interview was done by Edward, who was the son of the king, the heir apparent to the throne. He did sit on the throne for a little over 10 months. In this interview in 1939, he is 75 years old. What'd I say the year was? And he died within 2 years of this interview. He became king on the 20th of January 1936. He abdicated on the 10th of December in 1936. And so he was the uncle of Queen Elizabeth. And he speaks very fondly about all his family, including Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, her husband. So that's the difference. I just wanted to like discuss that a bit because we do know who Harry and Meghan are. We know everybody now. We know Princess Diana. We know Prince Charles. We know Catherine. We know everybody because we're living in this time. But I just think it was just important to give that context of who this man was, and because we were not in that time. So a little history lesson. I needed it too. But thank you so much for watching, guys. And I want you to comment some more, please, and subscribe and press the bell notifications. I'm going to be doing videos a lot more frequently now because I want to talk about the comments. I'm trying to get to all the comments and I really do respond to them. If you look and see, I do respond to them, but I wanted to do like a video like talking about those things, and any questions you have from here, please ask me and let's discuss it. I'm gonna have videos out much more frequently because I love it. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.